Hey guys, as promised, I'm finally showing you how to structure the IELTS Writing Task 1 component and how to achieve a Band 8. Even if you're looking for a Band 5, 6 or 7, this video will also be perfect for you and will show you very easy techniques to remember when you're in the test. So I've chosen this task as it's relatively straightforward, but it's also so that you guys can build your skills up from the very basics. This was found via a Google search, and it just says, the charts below show the proportions of British students at one university in England who were able to speak other languages in addition to English in 2000 and 2010. You are also given two pie charts and just more in-depth information as to what else the pie charts are detailing. Before we go back to the pie charts, the formatting for Task 1 academic should be as follows. At times, these may vary depending on how complex the data is given in the task, but I would say 90% of the time they are quite short tasks, and this structuring works perfectly for a high score. You want to start off with your introduction, then an overview, which I'll explain why it's so important later, and 2 paragraphs further detailing the other data that you are given. You are not supposed to give a conclusion because this is not a formal essay like you would be writing in Task 2. For the introduction, it's extremely simple, and if you've already watched my other video on Task 2, then you'll know that I would say to paraphrase whatever is written in the task because this information is already given. You're basically paraphrasing it because if you copy it word for word, then you'll lose marks for one of the marking criterion, which is lexical resource. You're basically here to show off your English language abilities. So show off at any opportunity you can as to how well your vocabulary is. The second most important thing is to state what type of graph or chart or illustration this is. So what I wrote is, the 2 pie charts compare the percentage of British students from a university in England who were able to speak languages other than English in 2000 and 2010. Do you guys see how that I have copied the question, but I've just changed a couple of the key words around? That's what paraphrasing is. So I've described what the charts are. I said they're pie charts. Instead of saying show, I've said compare. Instead of saying one university, I've said a university. And I've also changed the part where it says who were able to speak other languages in addition to English to who were able to speak languages other than English. The next part is the overview. It is extremely important because even if you write an excellent summary of what you see, you may potentially be marked down a band for not including it. If we look at the IELTS Task 1 writing band descriptors, Band 5, 6 and 7 under Task Achievement state that there needs to be an overview. So if your overview is clear, you will get a band 7 if you've also covered all the main trends and points. If your overview wasn't too clear, but you've also covered some of the points in the task, then you get a band 6. If you have hardly covered the data given with no clear overview, then you get a band 5. If you've presented everything strongly with a very clear, succinct overview, then you'll get a band 8. But then if you've gone into detail about all the information given, but you've not written an overview at all, then you may be marked down from a band 8 to a band 7. With overviews, you want to present information as if you are zooming out of the pie charts. Remember how I've called the next 2 paragraphs after this details? That's when you zoom into the pie charts. So right now, don't provide any specific data like 10% or 15% increases because this is for later on. Right now, you just want to highlight what is the highest or lowest percentage, almost like an outline, as well as highlight any other significant changes you see over time. So for our overview, I have written, overall, there were 6 categories students fell into with the ability to speak only either English, French, German or Spanish, another language or 2 other languages. In both years, students who were only able to communicate in Spanish occupied the highest percentage amongst others, whilst the number of students who spoke no other languages than English halved. So for the third paragraph, I went into more detail in the data that was available. I chose to discuss the trends that increased over time. It is generally up to you as to how you want to separate your paragraphs, but it can be tricky, I understand, because sometimes you are just given a lot of information. But the trick is to try to find the best way to make everything clear for the marker. So for this paragraph, for instance, that's why I chose to only discuss trends that have increased in the decade. So what I wrote was, as mentioned, the most popular language that was spoken other than English in both years was Spanish, occupying about a third of the languages spoken amongst British students. This percentage rose from 30% to 35%. Similarly, there were 5% increments amidst those who could speak another language other than French, German, and Spanish, rising from 15% to 20%, and those who were multilingual in 2 other languages from 10% to 15%. For the last paragraph, I basically covered the trends that decreased over time and whatever information I have not provided. Because I've already discussed students who spoke only Spanish above, I have not done so here. So what I wrote was, by contrast, the percentage of students who were only able to communicate in French reduced from 15% in 2000 to 10% 10 years later. The number of those who were able to converse in German remained at the same percentage at 10%. So this is just a snapshot of the entire task that I have written. You can either pause it here for a read, and I will also try to remember to paste it in the description box below. We have covered all parts of the task and presented the main trends together with the overview that I've previously discussed to make sure that this all sits within a band 8 for task achievement. All our information was also sequenced logically. Basically, with all essays, you want to start out by providing an outline and basically letting the marker know what the big picture is. So this is what the introduction is usually for in task 2, but over here it's the introduction and the overview. And then we zoom into the finer details like we have in the last 2 paragraphs. This then ensures that each paragraph flows to the next one, as well as how each paragraph is very clear in its intent. So this is why I basically made one paragraph about the trends that increased and the other one about the trends that decreased. To guarantee a band 8 in lexical resource, I like to change words up a lot and use uncommon words as much as possible to show off to the marker that I have a great range of vocabulary. So if we look back at what I wrote, I said communicate instead of speak. Instead of saying a percentage went from 20% to 10%, I just wrote that it halved. Instead of saying 30%, I said roughly a third, because I think it goes up to 35% in 2010. And instead of saying things like 2000 and 2010, I wrote 15% in 2000 and 10% 10 years later. So these are just self-explanatory things that the marker will understand. So you just have to be comfortable with using a bit more complex language if you are familiar with it. And these are just simple ways to make your vocabulary stand out. As for grammatical range and accuracy, I always make sure to have a good mix of simple and complex structures and just change things around. Most of all, I always double check that my tense is correct, whether in past tense or present tense, because sometimes my brain may just turn off and I just make mistakes. I also make sure that my punctuation is correct, and if I'm unsure, then I just don't risk it. For example, a lot of students like to add, more fancy punctuation like semicolons, colons. Sometimes they just use it wrong. So I just advise them to stick to simple punctuation and grammar if they are unsure, and that way you don't make as many mistakes. So yeah, that was it, guys. I hope this video has helped at least one of you and that it was easy enough for you to comprehend. Sorry it took so long for me to get it done, but that's why I don't have a camera recording my face, because that just takes forever to set up and edit, and I have to get out of my pajamas, and I love wearing my pajamas. Anyway, have a great week ahead, and remember to be kind to other people. Hopefully see you guys in my next video. Bye!